You're now listening to the Peach Pundit podcast, where we are expressing our own personal opinions. These views may not reflect the opinions of those whom we may be professionally affiliated.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Peach Pundit podcast. I'm Jason Pye, joined by Scott Turner. Scott, how you doing, buddy?
It has been a crazy week, Jason, but I am joyful.
It has been. You guys might notice that we are one short this week. Buzz is on vacation. Technically speaking, I am on vacation as well. I am actually in the motherland. I am in Georgia. I drove down from Virginia yesterday
Welcome home.
And stopped by Buc-ee's. They just opened a Buc-ee's in Florence, South Carolina. It's been open for about a week. I stopped by there yesterday, spent way too much money. That's
the point of Buc-ee's.
That's the point of Buc-ee's. I bought this big jug that I can get soda in and stuff. I might have.
Did you get any jerky?
I did actually. Yeah. I haven't eaten any of it yet, but I did buy some. I ate I also got some chocolate covered pretzels, which were really good, and a few other things. And then today I went to Publix to buy all the beer I could not buy in Virginia. So I got all the local brews that are not. I got Creature Comforts Tropicalia. Actually got 24 cans of that. I got Three Taverns. I got a couple different Three Taverns. I got
Reformation Jude.
Scofflaw. I got Reformation Jude. I got stuff. I have a marathon band practice next Saturday, so it's like a 5-hour band practice. So, and we like to drink when we play. So my bandmates will be enjoying some of those beers. So
you are a good friend for bringing in that high quality stuff right there.
See, I think so too. But anyway, enough about me. We are in post-primary world here in the state of Georgia. Tuesday night was interesting, to say the least. Let's just say the polls got it wrong. It was not a 30-point victory. It was a roughly 50-point victory for Governor Brian Kemp, who handily beat David Perdue and the rest of the field, which includes Candace Taylor and obviously David Perdue. And Perdue won't be the governor.
It was sort of a really sad ending to a guy who started his career in politics with so much promise and so much potential, goes to DC, basically falls in love with the place, doesn't really do any of the things that he said he was going to do when he was there, comes back, runs a lackluster reelection campaign for his Senate seat, so much so that he wouldn't even show up to debate John Ossoff a second time, and basically handed the Democrats a Senate seat from Georgia for 6 years. And then decides, well, the election was stolen from me, so I'm going to go run on that and try to unseat a governor who used this past legislative session to pass the most sweeping and impactful conservative legislative agenda that I have seen since I've been watching Georgia politics, and just hammered him saying, I have a record and you don't. And ultimately stopped campaigning against David Perdue because he realized David Perdue wasn't the threat. Stacey Abrams was. And in the middle of the primary, pivoted to fighting off Stacey Abrams as opposed to David Perdue. It was amazing to watch and exciting to see the result. Frankly, I predicted 54%. I was off by a huge amount, but some of the polls, Jason, geez, Pete, insider advantage, the day of saying it's at 52. Trafalgar Group, which is the Trump pollster, it's at 52. The bias was obvious. This is insider advantage is a long established group. They need to do some soul searching about what they want to be known for, because they were way off and their bias had been showing since December.
Yeah. I mean, and just looking at and going back and looking at the polls and pulling up Real Clear Politics right now to take a look at the polls. I mean, there were polls that where Kemp was starting to peak into the 60s, and the most notable ones were Landmark Communications and Fox News. They had Perdue peaking into the 60s, and Fox News had Perdue at 28. Landmark Communications had Perdue at 30. And he wound up with 21 points, 21 rounded up 21.8% of the vote. And then Kemp had 73.7% of the vote. So,
and it wasn't like Donald Trump wasn't trying, because at the end there had the week before the primary, it appeared that perhaps David Perdue was throwing in the towel. And he had very few events on his calendar. The AJC comes along. They do this story saying he's not on the road. He's not doing public events. He's come off the airwaves and the television ad buy. He just wasn't there. And then all this, because in reaction to that story from the AJC, there was a flurry of activity afterwards. All of a sudden, he had 15 events instead of just 3. And there was an ad that was run last minute, came to me via text. And in the ad, it showed, first of all, it showed Donald Trump and Melania doing this weird push tomahawk chop at the World Series. Like, they don't know that the chop is a singular elbow motion. They're pushing like this for their, it's like, okay. And it starts with, it shows him doing that, saying Donald Trump knows Georgia. Well, if you know how to do the chop, you know how to do it properly.
Yeah, right.
He wasn't, but it's just neither here nor there. It's just a funny observation. But in the ad, he has this narrator say, it doesn't matter if you cheered for Trump at a rally, had a sign for Trump in your yard, or a Trump bumper sticker on your car. You cannot be a Trump supporter if you vote for Brian Kemp. And I'm not paraphrasing. A whole lot of people who support Donald Trump went to the ballot box on Tuesday and they voted for Brian Kemp. A lot of them.
Yeah.
So that last minute ditch attempt just didn't work, right? I mean, a lot of votes had already been cast, but even on election day, a lot of my friends who are Republicans got that text message and with that video, and it just fell on deaf ears. Like the whole thing, Brian Kemp let me down, just fell on deaf ears for the Georgia Republican voter.
It did. And you got to wonder, because Trump had seen mixed success coming into Georgia. And you got to wonder, I mean, he really overplayed his hand here in the state. And we'll get to some of these other races in a minute. But he really overplayed his hand because Perdue and Raffensperger were his top targets. Herschel's win was a foregone conclusion, and everybody knew it. Herschel didn't need Trump's endorsement to win.
Right.
He would have run away with that anyway.
No pun intended.
No pun intended. But the Kemp and Raffensperger wins are huge black eyes for Trump, and there's really no way to spin it.
Well, and not just, I mean, the John Gordon versus Chris Carr result, was
I forgot about
was
that
also just massive, right? We're talking 50 points. The thing that really stands out to me is how Trump selected his candidates, because he didn't select quality people to challenge these incumbents or even other candidates who are running. He selected sort of the cast-offs, the people who weren't qualified. And so it calls into question that, if he's going to get involved in Georgia politics at this level, what qualifications or standards or key metrics is he using to decide how to endorse a candidate? And it appeared, I think, to many Republican voters, if not the majority, that the only thing that Trump was concerned about was payback and revenge.
Yeah.
And that wasn't good enough to throw out incumbents who've been doing their job and doing it the right way.
No, you're right. I mean, and there have been other questions of Trump getting bad advice, bad candidate, or bad political advice when endorsing candidates. And you have to start, like, one of the things you have to start wondering, I think at this point, does Trump's endorsement matter as much as people think it does? And I would say probably not, but probably not as much as the media wants you to think it does. Obviously it helped. I mean, I can't remember. Did Trump endorse Burt Jones?
He did.
Okay, so Burt Jones, and Burt Jones is barely clinging on to the 50 plus one threshold right now. Looking at the Secretary of State's website, he's at 50, almost literally 50 and a vote is where he's at.
He's at 50%. 0.08.
That's correct. Right. So there is that. So, so he's going to win. Herschel wins, but like the rest of the candidates he endorsed just got blown away. And
he had a couple in runoffs. He has Jake Evans in a runoff in CD6 against Rich McCormick, who doubled the number of votes roughly that Jake Evans had in the first round. So he got over 40%, I think. And then Jake was in the low 20s. So he has that. He could still potentially pull out a win. And Vernon Jones made a runoff in the CD10, but was in a distant second place. Look, I think the Trump endorsement is worth something. But you cannot go out there like John Gordon's campaign for Attorney General was – the Trump endorsed John Gordon. Patrick Witt's campaign for insurance commissioner against John King was I am the Trump endorsed Patrick Witt for insurance commissioner. They had nothing else.
Yeah.
There was nothing else for them to say other than they were Trump endorsed for these races. Why would a president of the United States care who the insurance commissioner is of the state of Georgia?
Right.
And it's worth something because they got 20-something% of the vote. And that's about what we thought the Trump endorsement was worth. But there was nothing else on top of that.
Right.
Nothing.
Right.
And so, go ahead.
I was going to say one thing that I think that Trump and his political advisors, not knowing the landscape in Georgia, not knowing that when you have an incumbent Republican governor, not the state party apparatus, but voters tend to always gravitate behind that candidate. Because I remember when Perdue was governor, Sonny, obviously not David, who will once again not be governor of the state of Georgia. When Sonny was governor, everything lined up behind him. Because back in the day, Tom Murphy days, the speaker was the most powerful politician in the state. Obviously, when Sonny became governor, that dynamic changed. And the same was true of Deal. Deal was the center of all political power in Georgia, and Brian Kemp is the center of all political power in Georgia, or most political power in Georgia. And that is something the Trump political apparatus, really didn't take into account. Georgia is a very different state. The Republican Party is not as it's party activists, and I think your post today was spot on, or I think it was your post or somebody else's post.
It was mine. Yeah.
Yeah. The post today was absolutely spot on. There's a difference between party activists and primary voters. There is a huge void between the two. And just because party activists feel one way, if Georgia had a convention style process, maybe it would have been competitive, but Georgia does not have that.
Right. And the party activists desperately want that now, right? Because there was crossover for Democrats. At one point it was at 16,000. I spoke with Stephen Fowler at the Pence event, and he told me he thinks it could get up to 80,000 people who had previously voted Democrat who pulled a Republican ballot. Obviously, Kemp won by more than 80,000 votes. So it didn't make the difference for him, but it just padded his numbers. The Kemp internal polling was around 65%. They felt confident they were going to break 60. And they had some polls that showed them at 65. That the crossover vote may have ended up helping to establish the blowout status for this particular race at 74. But all that to say that the difference between those two campaigns was just night and day as well. The money was behind Kemp, but the party itself, David Schaefer did everything he possibly could to meddle, to interfere, to try to throw mud and obscure the success. He did not say a single word about this legislative session. Nothing from the party yet has been mentioned about how successful the conservative agenda was during the legislative session. It was obvious that David Schaefer was on board with what Kemp was telling, or not Kemp, but Trump was telling him to do from Mar-a-Lago and pump up David Perdue, and he did his level best that whole time. And so if you're not reading the Peach Pundit blog, I did write about the differences. Brant Frost, the second chairman or vice chairman of the state party, had used, without permission, by the way, I'm told, the email list of all the delegates from the state convention and their alternates from last year's state convention. And he emailed a poll saying, hey, tell us how you feel about these people. Who would you vote for if the election was today? And I do some analysis on the differences between the results of that poll and what actually happened at the ballot box. And you should read it, draw your own conclusions, but the data is there. If Brant hadn't clandestinely used the email list without permission, we wouldn't have the data to show just how far the fissure has grown between the electorate and the activists. And the activists should probably take stock in just what it means to have a sitting governor, which you opposed by the poll numbers that Brant Frost put out, win with 74% of the vote. Like, what does that mean? What are the soul searching questions you're asking yourself today if you're one of the activists in the Republican Party, if you're in the party leadership structure? What are you asking yourself today? What is it? Where do you go from here? What are you going to do to make sure there's party unity heading into November? Because the Democrats are coming and they're going to spend tens of millions of dollars trying to unseat this guy. And we need you on board just as much as the people who showed up on Tuesday.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at just the numbers here, and it's just absolutely how the disconnect between the party could not be. David Perdue, 50.6%, Brian Kemp, 31.6%. Like how? And I'm telling you, the Republican Party, I think this is true of every Republican Party, not just in Georgia, but across the country. I'm not saying you have to be Democrat light. I'm not saying that. But stop with the conspiracy theory bullshit. Stop. Because you're driving away independence every time you talk about stolen elections or embrace crazy people like she who must not be named, who also won, and not unsurprisingly. But you're driving away voters who you might be able to get because of the fact that you're embracing radical candidates. You were going to say something.
Well, I'm going to piggyback off what you're saying, and that the people who came out and voted on Tuesday voted for a governor who passed a heartbeat bill, who passed a tax cut, who passed a tax refund, who voted to or pushed legislation to make sure teachers got a $5,000 total pay raise in his first term, who put money into police force and created a task force, who navigated the pandemic deftly and expertly. And we were the envy of the nation, other than maybe Florida, in how we handled the pandemic. And they came out and voted for this guy because of these policies. But libertarians are just as, one of the reasons why I ended up decades ago or decade and a half ago or however long ago it was, leaving the Libertarian Party is, you're not pure enough. You're not pure enough. You're not libertarian enough. And because I'm not completely, totally libertarian. I'm more conservative than I am libertarian, but I saw some things in the Libertarian Party back then that that attracted to me. It were attractive to me. So when I gave it a shot, it was like I was chased out. And this is what our party is doing now to the average Republican voter. They're chasing them out, saying, we don't want you here because you're not actually Republican enough. And we have a phrase for that. It's called Rhino, Republican in name only.
In libertarian circles, you would be known as a statist, which Scot is. Right. Scot is a statist.
Well, according to my libertarian friend Jason, yes, but a constitutional conservative apparently is a statist, and that's what I'm talking about. That type. That's the reason why
I'm just teasing.
And thank God I got pushed out of the Libertarian Party, frankly, because I didn't belong there. Right. I think the natural home for liberty-loving people is the Republican Party, and the libertarian voter should seriously give the record, the agenda, a good look heading into November, because I think the average libertarian is living a better life under these types of policies than it would be under Stacey Abrams.
Here's the thing. I think going back and looking at 4 years of Donald Trump, because I know I spent a lot of my time on this podcast, effectively trashing Donald Trump. I'm not gonna sit here and say there weren't some good things to happen in his administration. I worked on several pieces of legislation that became law. Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. I worked on that, became law, and I still to this day defend that law against the unfair tax. The First Step Act, obviously, that's actually one I have a copy of and proudly display in my office up in Washington D.C. Just the same. And deregulation. There was a lot of good deregulatory stuff that came in the administration. There were some couple bad things too. At least they didn't get those through. But there were a couple bad things too. That said, it's at what point? Because the issue I have with Trump more than anything else is his embrace of what I see as authoritarianism. He loved the strong man. He loved Putin. He loved Kemp. He loved Erdogan. That embrace of the strong man, which we saw in his own rhetoric here in the United States, and ultimately culminating in January 6th. And some of the things I've read just this week where he was apparently pleased that a crowd was saying, was pleased that they were saying, "Hang Mike Pence." And he was apparently upset or disappointed when Pence got whisked away to a secure location. That kind of stuff is that departure, because that stuff shouldn't happen here in the United States, but it did. And apparently it could happen again if he runs and is successful in 2024. Unfortunately, I haven't seen a candidate who I like enough who might run against him, because I see some candidates who are talking about running who, in some ways, are arguably worse. I'm not completely thrilled with DeSantis right now. DeSantis is a much more, he's exhibited some authoritarian tendencies, and he's much more politically savvy than Donald Trump ever was. Tom Cotton I'm not sure believes in the Bill of Rights other than the Second Amendment.
Here in Georgia,
I would potentially vote for Asa Hutchinson, but that's about it.
I would vote for DeSantis. I would vote for Ben Sass. I know that wouldn't make me popular in the Trump circles, but I don't know who's going to run at this point. If DeSantis runs, I'll look at the field. If it's Trump or DeSantis, I'm going to go with DeSantis. I have to make the decision with who I have available to me. I voted for Trump on 3 separate occasions, including the last time he was on the ballot. The last 3 times he was on a ballot that I got to vote for, I voted for him. I don't think Trump's emphasis or influence in Georgia is nil. It's definitely, there's still a Trump factor at play here. And I don't think it's wise for us to look at the results of Brian Kemp, because I think this election was an anomaly for a lot of different reasons. I don't think that Trump's dead in Georgia by any stretch of the imagination. I think the wise thing to do would be continue to praise the policies that did work. His Supreme Court nominees, as an example, praise the things that were good and focus on the future. And that's what Brian Kemp did in this election. And I think that's how he was able to get a lot of Trump supporters to vote for him. He never bashed on Trump. He focused on where he and Trump were aligned. And when they were not aligned, he didn't mention him by name. He just simply said, I opened my state when I was pressured to keep it closed. And the person keep pressuring him was Donald Trump. But he didn't mention him. He didn't attack him directly. He never did that. I think that's the blueprint, right? Is to say, here's my record. I support the president's policies on XYZ, but I'm going to do ABC, moving the state forward.
Yeah.
And I think that's the formula for Republicans who don't necessarily who are opposed by Trump.
Yeah.
And then that's because our whole slate did that. That one, they never bashed on Trump. They simply said, I agree with the president's policies, but here are my things that I want to work on. Well, and it was appealing to the voter.
Before we move on, actually, we need to move on. But before we move on to some of the more the congressional races, things like that, and the Democratic side, I do want to pay special attention to the Secretary of State's race because I did not expect Brad Raffensperger to win outright.
Me neither. I owe Stephen Fowler a beverage. I bet him a cup of coffee, and he told me he didn't drink coffee. So I said, whatever beverage you want, we'll bet that this is a runoff. And he was right, and I was wrong.
Yeah, I was. Oh my gosh, I remember sitting there watching the results come in. I mean, Raffensperger never trailed Jody Heiss. And from what I can remember, and at 8%, he was at like 50. He was just over 50%. And I was like, I mean, Secretary Raffensperger, don't take this the wrong way. But I looked at the results and I said, man, that son of a bitch might do it. Yeah, I'm like Ian Malcolm in Jurassic Park. Son of a bitch did it. The crazy son of a bitch did it. And
if there was somebody who benefited from the Democrat crossover in the open primary,
100%.
It was definitely Brad Raffensperger.
100%.
It was definitely Brad Raffensperger because I think it went at 52% or something.
Yeah, it was just over 52, 52.3. Yeah, and high set at 33%. But here's the thing. I mean, he beat Jody by more than 200,000 votes. Granted, that if the number is as high as 80,000 of Democratic crossover, that's probably enough to propel the Raffensperger into
winning without a
runoff. But the question is, did all of them vote for Raffensperger? Anyway,
well, the sample size was really small. Patricia Murphy at the AGC did contact some of them and put them on the record and asked them why they were doing it. And obviously she's not able to poll all, however, tens of thousands there were, but to a person, they all told her, or at least the ones that she reported about, they all told her the reason why they were doing it was to stomp on Trump some. And I mean, if that's the case, Raffensperger definitely benefited from that open primary type of thing, which I think honestly, it puts the Democrats in a really bad position heading into November. Win and was it D. Dawkins Hagler or who was the second place finisher?
Yeah, it was D. Dawkins Hagler.
So D. Dawkins Hagler, African American, who served in the legislature with me for a long time, formerly the chairwoman of the African American caucus in the House. Well respected. She's in the race, right? Mm-hmm. Win had publicly tweeted, she was dismayed at the crossover vote because she was going to need those people in the event of a runoff. She comes in with 40% of the race. Let me see,
44.19.
She came in at 44.1 to D. Dawkins Hagler's 18.7. So she's in a runoff. She's going to have to spend money heading into November. Mm-hmm. Resources, time, effort, energy. Burning out her volunteer base, and they're going to have to get her nominated here in the runoff election. And the people who crossed over are not allowed to vote Democratic now. They're Republicans for this cycle. So they don't get to go back and say they're going to pull a Democratic ballot to go vote for Win. If Win is the nominee, her whole campaign is that Republicans want to steal the election from you. Mm-hmm. Well, who's the guy who stood up and said, I'm not going to allow this election to be stolen, right, and faced immense pressure to the point where his political career was on the line?
Yep. That's
Brad Raffensperger. That neuters that argument for Win. So I think Brad gets reelected easily.
Yeah.
Because B doesn't have an argument to make.
That's right. And here's the thing. I mean, B can still rant against SB 202. Which I'm sure she will, but
really, we want to talk about that for a sec.
No. I mean, we've talked about that enough. I mean, considering primary vote was like all-time records. Yeah. But I'm saying that's probably where they'll go. But one thing I want to say about Raffensperger, because we've ripped on him quite a lot, so much so that I think early on we thought that Heiss would beat Raffensperger. Though I will say this much. There are things Raffensperger did during his very public feud with Donald Trump that I disagree with, that I thought were mistakes. That said, I will give him this. He deserves a Profile and Courage Award for standing up to Donald Trump, even if I don't disagree with everything he did. And I'll say this once again, I don't like everyone in his office, and my public back and forth with his Deputy Secretary of State may not be well known to everyone on this podcast, but certainly known to some of the people who listen to it. But he did the right thing, and he put his career on the line, as you said, to do the right thing. And I think that deserves very, very much public recognition, not just a primary win, which he has done, but it deserves more public recognition than what he's gotten. And same goes for Brian Kemp.
Yeah. Well, I don't, with SB 202, if B decides to go down that road, the results will not back up her claims, right? So Raffensperger has an easy made path. A record number of people voted. Lines were short. People took advantage of early voting. There wasn't, unless you're Candace Taylor, an accusation of fraud during this election. You know, David Perdue conceded cleanly. The people who are going to runoffs have gotten there cleanly. You know, there's no sense that this election was tampered with or rigged, or there's no headlines that point to ballot harvesting. And so you have all of that to say that if B-Win wants to bash on Raffensperger for being a Republican because the Republicans want to steal elections, well, he kind of stood up against some really huge influential power and pressure. So that's not going to work. And if you're going to attack SB 202, the results proved out that that's not going to work. There was no voter suppression in SB 202. It was a lie. Right. It was a flat lie. And so if she wants to get out there and please go try if you want to, the facts aren't on your side on that. They're just not.
Right. Moving along to some other things, Georgia 10, one of the more interesting races, and we'll also talk about Georgia 6 real fast because I think Georgia 6 runoff is going to be really interesting. Georgia 10 runoff, Vernon Jones versus Mike Collins. I mean, Vernon did a lot better, I think, than a lot of us thought he would do, finishing second, only roughly 4 points behind Mike Collins, Timothy Barr, Paul Brown, the third and fourth place finishers, respectively. David Curry finishing fifth. But Mike Collins, Vernon Jones going to a runoff next month. I honestly don't know what to expect.
I would hope that the actual Republicans that didn't make the runoff in that race would get behind Mike Collins because Mike Collins is an actual Republican. That's what I would hope would happen. Vernon Jones is not a Republican. I sat next to the dude for 5 years in the legislature. He's not a Republican. He doesn't believe like a Republican. He doesn't behave like a Republican. He doesn't treat other human beings with respect. The staff members, I've seen it with my own eyes, man. I've seen it with my own eyes. How he treats people, how he talks to people. When he is challenged, he gets combative very easily. And that's what I would hope would happen. And if that happens, I think Mike Collins is going to Congress. If there's still some infighting and wounds and whatever else, then I think Vernon still has a shot. But in the category of Georgia politics is just so incredibly entertaining, Mike Collins has bought a batch of rape whistles with the realvernonjones.com URL printed on them. And he tweeted out, looks like I'm going to have to buy a new batch of rape whistles as a campaign, I guess, piece of a novelty, I guess.
That's going to get real ugly.
I think it already has gotten real ugly. And if you're not familiar with the allegations against Vernon Jones, Bluestein, if you can go find Bluestein's Twitter, he reran an article that he wrote about the sleepover, the infamous sleepover. He just won re-election as DeKalb County CEO. He invited two women over to watch Finding Nemo. That's part of the article. And they ended up having a menage a trois that he said was consensual, but one woman claims was rape. And she never actually pressed charges. So the allegations are out there. They've never gone away. They've always been there. And so I've never seen a campaign distribute rape whistles before. That's a new one on me. But boy, is this Georgia politics or what?
No, it's going to be, that one's going to be really, really interesting, because when I lived in Georgia, I lived about 2 miles from that district, and always paid a lot of attention to it, just because it was, it was always very, very interesting. But this race, this runoff, I'll say this much, driving down 20, coming into the state yesterday, between Augusta and Covington, I saw 3 Vernon Jones billboards. Now, 2 of them said Vernon Jones for governor. At the top they said Kemp lied, and it said Vernon Jones for governor. Only one was for his congressional bid. But hanging out here in Covington, I've noticed quite a few Vernon Jones signs, just in Newton County alone. So maybe he wins. I don't know, but if he wins, I hope Republicans in Congress know what they're getting.
Though they're getting yet another Marjorie Taylor Greene like congressman from Georgia. That's what they're getting. Only not as conservative.
I wonder if they realize that. I mean, because I wonder if they realize his record. Because I pulled up the House Freedom Fund's website, which is the PAC affiliated with the House Freedom Caucus. They haven't endorsed in that race, and I wonder if they've ever looked at his past, his state legislative votes, seeing how pro-choice he was, how anti-gun he was.
One of the things that's been perplexing to me is how the Republican establishment / machine from D.C. came down so hard on Madison Cawthorn, but Marjorie Taylor Greene escapes that type of scrutiny. Why is that, Jason?
I've wondered that myself, because with Madison Cawthorn, I mean, it was not just any one thing, but the thing that seemed to have really blown up was his accusation of, seeing someone do a key bump of cocaine and being invited to an orgy, which these 2 things were almost certainly not true.
Almost certainly?
I would venture to say they weren't true at all, but I mean, look, I've encountered a few people in DC, not who work in Congress, but people who work in DC who work on the conservative side. I've encountered them and known that they had used or still use cocaine, but the orgies, that's new. I had never heard that before. So, but
I mean, the way I know that they're not real is I wasn't invited. I mean, that's how I know.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's, and my guess is, like, when you're talking about, it's one thing to do something incendiary and then to make accusations against some of your colleagues. That's apparently how you draw the line, but I don't understand it, because I would say an allegation like that. I actually wrote this in my newsletter, that apparently you can attend, members of the House Republican Conference, because there were 2 members of the House Republican Conference who attended this, American, I think it was America First Political Action Conference, who it was Paul Gosar, Marjorie Taylor Greene. They attended this and spoke with a guy on stage whose name escapes me, Nick Fuentes, that's his name, who said nice things about Hitler from the stage, who said really nice things about Putin.
Flaming racist.
And Marjorie Taylor Greene was standing right there when all this stuff was happening. And, but she gets no admonition. I mean, she gets admonition, but the most that has happened to her is she's been called to the principal's office, meaning House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. She has not been,
and that has worked stellar. I mean, that's been so effective.
And he has
said no one ever.
Yeah, and after she got booted off her committee assignments, after Gosar got booted off his committee assignments, they were promised better committee assignments if Republicans take the House. I mean, and she was on Ed and Labor and Budget. there are not really that. I mean, you're going to put her on an A committee? You're going to throw her on Ways and Means or Energy and Commerce? If you do that, are you crazy? I mean, those are A committees, financial services.
Right.
Those three committees, if you're on that committee, that is your only committee assignment. You can't do anything else.
Right.
So I can't imagine. I cannot imagine they're going to put her on one of those, and they would be crazy if they did. But if you have a majority, typically speaking, if when you're in the minority, you want your conservative members to be out in front because they're your bulldogs. They're the ones who are gonna want to investigate, who are going to throw bombs in committee hearings, who are going to be in front, on Fox News. You want them to rile up your base. But when you're in the majority, your conservative members are the last people you want speaking. So I'm wondering how they're going to tame not just her, but others. And I'm wondering how long this honeymoon's going to last between conservatives and congressional and House Republican leadership, because I don't think it's going to be long. It's going to be really interesting. The next several months are going to be very interesting, especially going into next year.
I think in order for her to go, the folks up there are going to have to engage in the Cawthorn strategy with her. And it doesn't look like they're willing to, and she's going to be there for as long as she wants, unless they do. And and there's nothing in her behavior to indicate that she's going to change, and she's going to continue to be an embarrassment. That's the bottom line. And to a large degree here in Georgia, we have a little bit of "don't come in here and tell me what to do" type of attitude. And so whether or not it would even work would be something. But it wasn't really until Tom Tillis got pissed off with Cawthorn that was enough, right? So we would need some sort of Republican leader in a high echelon, a Brian Kemp, to come and say that you're an embarrassment to our state. You're hurting things. Stop. Yeah. And in order for that to happen, and I don't think it's going to. No. And I think Brian Kemp's worried about governing the state more than he is about what happens in D.C.
No, I agree with you. And that's the thing, based on everything I've heard about her, Cawthorn got taken out in part because you're right. Tillis, his own personal issues, which extended beyond, his accusations against some of his colleagues. And he also had really bad constituent services. Now, he and Green have that in common. She has really bad constituent services, as far as I've heard and have written about. But those things are becoming less and less important as long as you're saying the right things in DC, as long as you're owning the libs, which seems to be largely the Republican Party platform these days, at least amongst the activists. That kind of stuff is going a long way, and that's how someone like her wins re-election. Plus, she raised a ton of money. She had several $1 million, from the outset to protect herself. And Jennifer Strahan as better of a candidate as she was, and a moderating influence. Now, I'm not calling her a moderate, just more moderating than Marjorie Taylor Greene would have been. Couldn't take her out. And Georgia's 14th congressional district will still have no representation. That 700 and 800,000 people in that district will have no representation. None of her bills will ever pass. She is not a serious lawmaker, and you get what you pay for.
Goodness.
So, yeah, it sucks to live in that district. So. Moving along, got a couple things related to Stacey Abrams here. So I actually caught this one. Stacey Abrams says Georgia is the worst state to live in the nation.
Do you think that?
I miss Georgia. Virginia is nice, but Georgia's not the worst place to live. God, one thing I was driving around noticing here today is how much cheaper gas is here than up there. It's about,
here in a couple of weeks, the gas tax is going to be reinstalled on top of that, so it'll jump 40 cents a gallon.
Okay, well, it's about 40 cents cheaper here than it is in Virginia right now.
Because we're not taxing it right now. Right?
Yeah. But no.
Go fill up. If you're listening to this on the week of May 26th, you got a few more days to buy your gas tax free. Go fill up.
No, but her saying that Georgia's the worst place to live. What that caught me off guard, and it's kind of interesting for her to make a comment like that when you're literally trying to become governor. And
please run on that. 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 Listen to me. I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt, right? I'm going to play devil's advocate just a second, and then I'm going to slay her. I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second. For just a second, right? Because here's the whole context of what she said. She said, I'm tired of hearing that Georgia's the number one place to do business when this is the worst state to live. Because our infant mortality rate is so high, our incarceration rate is so high, or we have a record number of uninsured people. Like, they don't have a direct choice on whether or not they're uninsured because they're all employed at this point. But she listed a whole bunch of things that she wants to tackle as governor. But the way that she said it was, this makes us the worst place to live. And it doesn't. Right. It absolutely doesn't. Right. If you want to be uninsured in Georgia, you have access to jobs because we're the number one place to do business, so you can pay for your health insurance. The government doesn't need to do that for you. You don't need to pass on the cost of your health insurance to future generations, which is what expanding Medicaid would do in Georgia. We would have to rely on federal dollars that do not exist, that are borrowed or printed, which causes inflation or also drives up the debt that future generations would have to pay. But our program here says we're going to make sure that you are in an environment where you can get a job and you could pay for your own health insurance if you want it. And if you don't, the state, it's not going to penalize you. The federal government will penalize you. They'll tax you if you don't have it. But we're not going to. And this is the best place in the country right now to raise a family, because you can get a job, because we're not closed or shut down like she wanted us to be. Our schools remained open when other places were shutting down their schools during the pandemic. Our houses of worship stayed open. This made us all a magnet for people around the country. The number one place Californians are leaving to go move to is where? You're sitting in it right now. Yeah. Georgia. Yeah. They're coming here. Why are they coming here? Because it's better than California. Yeah. People are coming here in record numbers because it's the best place to live. I cannot believe she would say this is the worst place to live. And she wants to be governor here? Yeah. Listen, you're not running for president of Earth. You're running for governor of Georgia.
Unified Earth. But that's the thing. You look at states like California, New York, and Illinois. They lost congressional seats in the most recent census precisely because people are seeking the exits from those states.
Right.
Why would you want to
and they have been for a long time.
So why would you want to make Georgia more like those states? A high tax state with high cost of living. Yeah, look, no, the infant mortality rates in those states is much lower than Georgia. Much lower. Georgia has if you count Virginia, Georgia has the third lowest infant mortality rate in the Southeast. Only Florida and Virginia are ahead of Georgia. So that's not that bad. And yeah, I mean, you can have a debate on Medicaid expansion and whether Medicaid expansion would help lower that rate, but we're ahead of most of our regional partners. So, why make that?
And we love our fried food, Bo.
And we love our fried food.
Give me some of that fried chicken.
Yeah, yes, sir.
It's not exactly healthy.
Yeah, you know where I'm going for lunch?
Sure is tasty.
I'm not going for fried food, but you know where I'm going for lunch tomorrow? The Vortex.
You get that burger on. Yeah, I got you.
I'm getting my blue shroom.
Get them tater tots.
Get my blue shroom and my tater tots. But and I've already mentioned that I bought literally every kind of beer I really like that I can't get in Virginia. But no, I mean, right. if you don't like Georgia, why are you running to lead it? Why, if you're calling it the worst state, why are you running to lead it? Granted, now
it's just not true, Jason.
It's absolutely not true. And now you shouldn't go the route of David Perdue, who made a very racist comment in response to that. Not to beat up on the aforementioned former senator from the great state of Georgia, but he basically said, "Well, go back where you came from," which is probably not the best thing to say to a woman of color who who is going to be competitive in the governor's race.
Well, I don't know if it was based. He made some other racial comments that were incendiary during the closing days of the primary campaign. I don't know if telling somebody go back where you came from is based on race or not, though. If I separated those in my mind, that's a traditional Georgian response when anybody comes in here to try to tell us what to do, right?
Yeah.
That's how I'm reacting to Newt Gingrich these days, is go back to Virginia. I don't need Newt Gingrich to tell me what the landscape of Georgia politics is because I'm in it. He's not.
Are you telling me to go back to Virginia?
No, I'm telling you shouldn't be in Virginia. That's just my personal opinion. I mean, you do what you want with your life. I'm not telling you what to do, Mr. Libertarian. But
yeah, please don't tell me what to do. That's like I'm like Jessica Szilagyi as far as that goes. Please, sir, don't tell me what to do. And finally, Stacey Abrams, campaign manager, gives the double bird on social media.
I always felt like the Abrams campaign was trying to tell us to F off. And now I know for sure that's what they're telling us to do. Your initial foray into TikTok includes a moment where your campaign manager is giving the double bird. What exactly are you? And this is the worst state in the world to live in. What are you trying to tell me?
No, I mean this campaign is going to be brutal, especially when you add in the Senate race. It's going to be a brutal one, and Georgians are going to be so tired of it by the time it's all over. I
already am tired of it.
No, you like this stuff.
I do, but I mean, gosh, man, the media is just never going to give Kemp the benefit of the doubt, even though he got this huge win. There were way more Republican ballots pulled than Democrats. The SB 202 turned out to not be a voter suppression tool, but actually helped generate higher turnout than ever. Our state continues to have huge wins. Hyundai's building a electric car battery plant now in Georgia. We've got Rivian coming. We've got jobs and jobs and jobs and for miles and as far as the eye can see. And the Democrats are going to hoist her up because it's Stacey Abrams and the crown princess of Georgia politics. And they're going to give her the benefit of the doubt on everything she says. They're going to say that Republicans take everything she says out of context, which is why I added additional context around this is the worst state to live. It doesn't matter. Well, her overarching ideology politically is out of step with the average voter and the average citizen of Georgia. She represents a certain segment of population here, and she's going to be their voice, and that's fine. But the campaign between now and November is going to be skewed in the media to the point where the truth is going to be unrecognizable to many, and that's what's most unfortunate. Yeah. That's my prediction for the next 6 months.
Yep. Well, before we go, I do want to tease a special podcast that we have with Congressman Barry Loudermilk. For those of you who saw this last week, I wrote about an accusation that was, not so subtle accusation that was leveled against Congressman Loudermilk. He was accused of essentially giving a reconnaissance tour around the Capitol. And the January 6th committee, who I've been fairly supportive of, I guess more generally than anything else, had sought him to give voluntary testimony or voluntary cooperation to the committee so they could speak to him about this tour. And I'm sorry, there's a clock in the background at my friend Aaron Brooks' house. So they wanted his voluntary cooperation to speak to the committee. And this was a constituent family who came in with children. And you'll notice the use of the term in the January 6th letter, the Capitol complex. The term is used in a very interesting way because the Capitol complex is and I mentioned this in the blog post, is quite sprawling. It's actually very large. It's not just the Capitol building. This includes the Russell, Dirksen, and Hart Senate office buildings. It includes the National, I think, Arboretum. I can't remember exactly what it's called. The Botanical Gardens or whatever. It includes the Cannon, Longworth, and Rayburn House office buildings, as well as the O'Neill and Ford House office buildings, which are sort of adjacent to Rayburn, down on another street. And it also includes the Library of Congress as well, because there are 2 or 3 Library of Congress buildings. The main one being the Jefferson one, but this is about, he apparently took these folks out to lunch. This is according to Congressman Loudermilk. Took folks out to lunch inside one of the House office buildings. Almost certainly that means Longworth, because they actually have a cafeteria in Longworth, and it's and would be open to the public. The Capitol's been closed to the public since the beginning of the pandemic.
Right. And he goes into all of that. It's about a 25 minute podcast. It was he and I, we sat and talked about it. We went through all the details, and he pushes back pretty strongly and explains his side of the story, which the media is not giving him the say. Rachel Maddow's out there claiming he's an insurrectionist because of this letter. Yeah, and that's the point, is that the accusation is the only thing that matters. The facts don't when it comes to this stuff. Yeah.
So, and he and the ranking member of the House Administration Committee are asking for the Capitol Police to release the tapes that will probably vindicate him and just show that it was a family. Anyway, we'll have this up. We're probably going to have it up separately. So
it will be separate.
So then it's about 20, 30 minute long podcast, something like that.
Yeah, it's 20, 25 minutes.
And it's audio only. But we'll be putting that out shortly. But thanks, folks, for listening. Scott, do you want to list our Patreons real fast?
Yeah, absolutely. You too can be a Patreon subscriber if you go to patreon.com/peachpundit. And we'd appreciate it if you did. This improved sound quality you've been enjoying over the last couple of weeks, that's because we're paying out of pocket for software that makes us sound better, that we can level our audio and get it all organized and make it sound good, so that you don't have to turn up the volume when Jason's talking and turn me down, or vice versa. Patreon.com/peachpundit. Right now, we have 3 subscribers who we just adore. And those 3 people are Sam Thomas, Benjamin Hurst, and Reed Powell. To the 3 of you, thank you so much for chipping in. Be like Sam, Benjamin, and Reed. Chip in a little. It's only $5. It'll go a long way to helping us keep this running for you.
Or you can give more than 5 if you want to, but
yeah, 5. And we'll give you a T-shirt with Jason Pye's face on it,
or Buzz's or Scott's. And let's face it, everybody wants Scott.
Yeah, I'm picking the Jason Pye shirt myself.
that shirt's actually fairly popular, just so you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, I wear it around here all the time. You get all kinds of comments like, "Who the hell is that?"
The people I live with in DC, the shirt has become the husband wears it all the time, and he actually, no joke, wore it out in public. We went out to dinner together, and he wore it, and I'm like, I'm at dinner with them. And just for the record, just so folks know, I'm contributing to the economy of the state of Georgia while I'm here. This was my shopping cart this morning at Publix. So there's Classic City Lager made by Creature Comforts. Got some Scofflaw Basement IPA. There's another IPA in there that got some Night on Ponce, and Creature Comforts Tropicalia, and then obviously Jude from Reformation. So
Reformation Brewery. Oh, you've got a text message.
I do have a text message coming in, but yeah, but that is.
Thank you to Sam Sam, Benjamin, Reed. Thank you 3 for being subscribers. We really appreciate it.
Yes, we do. Also, make sure to check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. And we'll see you soon. I will be out next week, but Scott and Buzz, I'm sure we'll keep the thing going. So, peace out. Have a good one, and go Dogs.